What if I told you that right now, while you're sitting there wondering if they've forgotten you, your ex is going through an emotional storm they'll never admit to anyone? The truth is, after a breakup, the story they tell the world is only half the picture. On the surface, they act relieved, convinced they've made the right choice, feeding their ego with reasons it had to end. But when the silence stretches and your absence starts sinking in, they feel the discomfort they didn't see coming. You listen successfully, and the silence begins to gather. The silence is always coming. They scroll through your socials late at night, masking their curiosity with fake indifference. They start questioning if you've emotionally detached, if you're already moving on without them. Regret creeps in as they romanticize moments they once dismissed. And while they seem unbothered on the outside, deep down, there's a tug of war between pride and vulnerability. They want to reach out, but the fear of rejection and losing control stops them every time. The messages they type and delete, the stories they watch without reacting, the what-ifs they play over and over in their head. It's all happening behind closed doors. This is exactly what they feel, but they'll never say it out loud. When a breakup first happens, the very first emotion your ex is likely to feel is relief. And I know that's hard to hear. It's not because they didn't care about you. It's not because you weren't important. And it's certainly not because the relationship meant nothing. It's because for weeks or maybe even months, they've been wrestling with doubt, discomfort, and emotional tension. They've been overthinking things, trying to make a decision, swinging between staying and leaving. And that whole time, they've been carrying the weight of that internal battle. So when the breakup finally happens, that internal conflict, it stops, at least temporarily. There's a release. They wake up the next day, and for the first time in a while, they're not debating anymore. They're not asking themselves, should I stay? They're not battling their guilt. They're free from the emotional tug of war they've been in. And in that space, they feel something that looks like peace. But here's the thing, that peace is shallow. It's surface level. It's the emotional equivalent of taking a painkiller that numbs the ache but doesn't solve the injury underneath. Because that relief isn't coming from true happiness or emotional clarity. It's coming from the absence of a decision they didn't want to keep making. And that relief, it's often tied to ego. It's their mind trying to reinforce that they did the right thing. They'll replay their list of grievances about you. They'll mentally highlight all the moments they were unhappy, all the ways the relationship wasn't working, and all the reasons they believed this breakup was necessary. That's their ego's way of protecting them from doubt. They want to feel validated in their choice. They need to. It's human nature. But here's what they won't admit, even to themselves. Deep underneath that ego response, there's a small, uncomfortable space growing inside them. A tiny seed of curiosity. A faint whisper that says, I wonder if they're hurting. I wonder if they're missing me right now. It's not loud enough for them to act on. Not yet. But it's there. The ego wants to feel that you're suffering without them. It craves the reassurance that they still matter to you, so they'll expect you to reach out. Maybe not immediately, but soon enough. They'll half anticipate a text, a call, a moment of weakness where you check in. And when that doesn't happen, when the silence stretches longer than they were prepared for, that's when the first crack appears in that fragile layer of relief. They won't admit this crack to their friends. They won't confess that they're refreshing their messages just to see your name pop up. They'll talk confidently. They'll say things like, "I'm sure they'll reach out eventually." Or worse, they'll joke about how you must be missing them already. They'll make it sound like they're thriving, like they've already moved on, like you were just a chapter they've now closed. But behind that mask, there's doubt. And what makes this emotional pattern even more intense is that it's fueled by contrast. The moment you stop chasing, when you pull your energy back, when you create true space, that's when their mind starts to turn on itself. Because now their ego is being starved of what it was counting on, your validation. This is why the initial relief your ex feels after no contact is so misleading. To them, it feels like peace, but it's really just emotional avoidance. It's a temporary high that fades the longer you stay silent. The longer they don't hear from you, the more the ego starts to panic. It goes from, "I made the right decision," to, "Wait, why aren't they chasing me?" And that's when the mental narrative starts to shift. But in that early stage, when they're still telling themselves they're fine, they're walking around with this silent expectation that at any moment you're going to break, that you'll text them late at night, that you'll show weakness first, that you'll confirm to them that they're still important enough to affect you. And when that doesn't happen, when the silence grows, their sense of control starts to crumble. That's the emotional reality of the first phase after no contact. A shallow relief propped up by ego, with cracks that get wider with every passing day of your absence. In the beginning, they think they're fine. That's the part that messes with you the most. Because from your side, it feels heavy. You're carrying the weight of memories, of connection, of all the moments that meant something to you. And there they are, silent, distant, unbothered. Or at least that's how it looks. They told you they needed space, or that the relationship wasn't working. And now it feels like they've seamlessly moved on without a second thought. That silence, it feels like a punishment, like you're the only one left holding pieces of something they've already thrown away. But here's the truth that most people never see, because your ex will never admit it to you. And half the time, they won't even admit it to themselves. That silence starts to get louder for them too. In those first few days, they're riding the high of their own decision. It's ego mixed with adrenaline. They reassure themselves, saying things like, "This was the right thing," or "We were fighting too much," or "I need to focus on myself." They almost narrate the breakup back to themselves like a story they're proud of writing. They fill their time. They text friends. They scroll social media. They distract themselves. And when you stay quiet, when you don't chase, don't beg, don't reach out, it makes them feel validated at first, like they were right, like they're in control. But time has a funny way of peeling back the truth, because after that initial rush, after the dopamine of freedom wears off, something shifts. And it's subtle at first. It starts in the tiny, empty pockets of their day. Maybe they're walking home after work or lying in bed at night, scrolling mindlessly on their phone, and they suddenly notice that their phone hasn't lit up with your name in days, then more days, and then a week, then two, and what used to be predictable, your check-in texts, your funny memes, your sweet little good mornings, those things are just gone. And even if they're not willing to say it out loud, that absence starts to itch. At first, they'll convince themselves it's nothing, that it's normal, that you're probably hurting and waiting for them to reach out first. They'll rationalize, thinking you're sitting there, staring at your phone, crafting some long paragraph you'll eventually send them. They'll tell themselves, I don't need to check in yet. They'll come to me. But each day you don't, that internal confidence they're holding on to gets chipped away, slowly but consistently. And that's when their mind starts doing things they can't control. They'll replay conversations in their head. They'll scroll through your old messages, sometimes laughing at a joke you made, sometimes pausing on a compliment you gave them that felt good at the time. They'll start to wonder where you are, what you're doing, if you've already started talking to someone new. They'll check their social media, but now with more attention, looking for clues. Were you out this weekend? Were you with someone? Did you look happy? And the irony? The more they see you not reaching out, the more curious they get. That silence that felt like freedom on day one, by week two, feels like rejection. And they won't admit that either. Their ego won't allow it. They'll tell themselves they're still fine. They'll tell their friends they're better off. But when they're lying awake at night, scrolling through old photos or wondering why you're suddenly so quiet, they'll feel the first pangs of discomfort. And here's the other thing they won't say. They're testing you without even meaning to. They're testing to see how long you'll go without breaking. Every day you don't reach out, you're communicating a message louder than any text you could send. You're saying, I don't need to chase you. And that unsettles them. They might start posting more on their stories, looking happier, busier, more social. They'll put up photos they think will get your attention. They'll craft captions that seem carefree and full of life, but half of it's for you. They want you to see it. They want you to react. They want proof that you still care. And when you don't, when you remain in that uncomfortable silence they chose, they start feeling it more intensely than they ever expected. It's not that they're waking up every day, drowning in regret, crying over the break. That's not how this works. It's quieter than that. It's psychological. It's the slow realization that the control they thought they had is slipping. That the person they thought would always be there, waiting, isn't. And here's the part that shifts everything. The longer you hold your ground, the more that silence stops being your pain and starts becoming theirs. They'll act like they're fine. That's the first thing you need to understand. The day you went silent, the day you stopped reaching out, they probably didn't skip a beat. On the outside, they went to work, hung out with friends, maybe even posted something upbeat on social media. They laughed at jokes, they smiled in photos, they replied to group chats like everything was business as usual. If you were watching from the outside, it would look like they didn't miss a step. And honestly, that's exactly what they want you to see. Because here's the truth most people won't tell you. After a breakup, appearances become everything. They don't want you or anyone else to think they're hurting. Their pride is on the line now. The idea that you could be out there wondering if they're crumbling without you, it terrifies them. So they put on the mask. They play the role of someone who's thriving, someone who's unbothered, someone who's moved on faster than you. But behind closed doors, that's where the story really plays out. They're scrolling through your social media late at night when no one's watching. They're hovering over your name, checking if you've posted something new, wondering who you're with. They're replaying that last conversation you had before the silence set in, dissecting your tone, your words, trying to figure out if there was some hidden meaning they missed. Did you sound like you were done for good? Did you seem cold? Or were you just hurt? They don't know, and that uncertainty eats at them. They'll check who's liking your posts. They'll notice if you went out somewhere you never used to go, if you're suddenly posting more gym selfies, more group photos, more smiles than usual. They'll pick up on it. They'll wonder if it's real or if you're trying to show them you're okay without them. Then there's a fear of being unokay without them actually being And the crazy part? Even when you're doing absolutely nothing to get their attention, they'll still think it's about them. Every photo, every caption, every update. They'll read into it like they're decoding some secret message, because that's what the silence does. It forces them to look for answers in places they never used to. And the more they scroll, the more frustrated they get. They want some sign that you're still affected, that you're struggling like they secretly are. They want to believe you're just as confused, just as hurt, just as stuck in your head as they are. But when they don't see it, when your life starts to look calm, or worse, happy, they feel this sinking panic. They'll never tell their friends the truth, though. If anything, they'll double down on the act. They'll go out more, they'll post more, they'll laugh louder at parties. They might even jump into casual conversations with new people just to show they're moving on. But if you strip all that noise away, it's still there. That restless, gnawing feeling they get every time they check their phone and don't see your name pop up. They'll convince themselves they're doing great, that you're probably the one sitting at home missing them, that you're the one who's going to break first. But at the same time, they'll draft messages they'll never send. Hey, just checking in. Or, funny thing reminded me of you today. Or even the classic, I hope you're doing okay. And they'll sit there staring at the screen, fingers hovering over the send button, before backspacing the entire thing and throwing their thought across the bed like it betrayed them for even letting the thought happen. This back and forth, this emotional tug of war between pride and vulnerability. It drains them, but they'll never admit it. Not to you, not to anyone, because admitting it would mean admitting that you still have power over their emotions, that despite all their best efforts to look like they've moved on, there's a part of them that's still stuck wondering about you. And this is where your silence becomes louder than any text you could ever send. When you go into no contact, there's something really important happening beneath the surface that most people don't realize. It's not just about making someone miss you. It's about shifting the emotional power dynamic in a way that the other person never saw coming. And one of the most powerful but least talked about things that starts happening during this time is that your ex begins to experience a very unsettling form of insecurity. In the beginning, they may have felt like they had all the control. They might have told themselves that breaking up was their choice, or even if it wasn't their choice, they comfort themselves with the idea that they could reach out to you anytime they wanted, that if they did, you'd be there. That safety net, that certainty, gives them an incredible sense of emotional leverage. But as the silence grows, something starts to shift in their mind. It's subtle at first. They notice you haven't texted. They might glance at their phone every now and then, thinking maybe there's a message from you. But when it doesn't come, they rationalize it. Maybe they're just giving me space. Maybe they're still upset, but they'll come around. They tell themselves stories that still keep them in control of the narrative. But as the days turn into weeks, that internal conversation starts to change. The longer you stay silent, the more that control starts to slip through their fingers. And what creeps in next is doubt. A doubt that gnaws at them at random moments when they're driving, when they're scrolling, when they're lying in bed late at night staring at the ceiling, wondering, wait, are they really moving on? That's when the real insecurity kicks in. They start thinking about the version of you that they used to know, the person who was always available, the one who'd answer the phone no matter what, the person who, even during fights, would eventually reach out and try to fix things. That version of you is gone. Now, there's a silence that feels unfamiliar. They don't recognize this new reality. And with every passing day, a seed starts to grow inside them. What if they don't need me anymore? What if they're starting to forget about me? What if they're starting to forget about me? What if they've emotionally detached? And here's the thing. Emotional detachment terrifies people more than anything else in these situations. It's not your anger that scares them. It's not even your sadness. It's your indifference. That's the moment they start to realize the safety net is gone. The version of you who would fight for them, argue with them, plead for answers, isn't showing up anymore. This insecurity doesn't just stay in one emotional box. It leaks into every area of their mind. Suddenly, every notification on their phone gives them a tiny spike of hope, only to be followed by disappointment when it's not you. They check your social media, looking for signs that you're sad or that you're missing them too. But what happens when you're not posting sad quotes, when you're not broadcasting your loneliness, when you're just living? That unsettles them even more. They start filling in the blanks with worst case scenarios. Are they talking to someone else? Did they meet someone better? Are they happier without me? The irony is, the very person who thought they had the upper hand now finds themselves wrestling with the very fear they never expected to face. And the most powerful part of this entire shift is that you didn't have to say a single word. You didn't have to beg. You didn't have to explain. You didn't have to prove your worth. Your silence became the loudest statement you could make. The longer you hold that space, the more they're left to confront their own feelings, their own loss, and their own vulnerability. And that inner battle between their pride and their growing insecurity becomes the thing they can't ignore anymore. You create a new reality where they no longer get to assume how you feel, where they no longer get to rely on old patterns of behavior. And in doing that, you shift the balance of power in a way that forces them to look at you and the relationship with a completely different lens. And whether they act on it or not, they'll always remember how it felt when they realized you were no longer waiting. Something interesting happens as time passes after a breakup. something your ex will probably never tell you out loud. In the beginning, they may have been laser focused on all the reasons the relationship wasn't working. The arguments, the tension, the moments where they felt misunderstood or disconnected. They told themselves they needed space, freedom, or clarity. And for a while, that story worked for them. That they started measuring what they saw. It helped them justify the decision. It made them feel like they were making the right choice for their happiness. But here's the thing about time. It has a funny way of softening the sharp edges of memory as days turn into weeks and the silence stretches on. The human brain starts doing what it does best, editing the past. Selective memory kicks in. The fights, they don't feel as significant anymore. The bad moments blur into the background. The complaints they once obsessed over seem smaller, less urgent, less defining. What starts to happen, often without them even realizing it, is that they begin to romanticize the past. They start to replay the highlight reel, the moments that felt special, the ways you made them feel loved, the times when being with you felt like home, the spontaneous laughs, the inside jokes, the comfort of your voice late at night. Those memories don't just fade. In fact, the more they sit in silence without new moments to replace them, the more those good memories rise to the surface. And because you're not there to remind them of any negative moments, because you're not texting, you're not chasing, you're not trying to argue or prove a point, they're left with this very one-sided version of the story. One where the warmth of what you gave them stands out more clearly than ever. They'll think back to those times you showed up for them when they were stressed. The little things you did that made their life easier. The way you used to encourage them when they doubted themselves. The way you smiled at them like they were the only person in the world. And here's what makes it even more complicated for them. They'll start asking themselves questions they don't want to answer. Did I give up on something too soon? Was I just reacting to temporary feelings? Was it really as bad as I made it out to be in my head? And these questions aren't just intellectual, they're emotional. They come late at night when they're lying in bed scrolling through their phone, resisting the urge to look at your social media, but doing it anyway. They come when they see a photo of you smiling, looking happy, maybe even looking better than ever. They wonder if you've started moving on. They wonder if someone else is getting the version of you they now realize they miss. The regret doesn't always show up in big dramatic ways. Sometimes it's just a pause when they hear a song that reminds them of you. Sometimes it's a wave of sadness when they pass a restaurant you two used to go to. Sometimes it's a smile that fades as quickly as it comes when a random joke reminds them of something only the two of you would understand. And the more they sit with this, the more their mind starts rewriting the narrative. Suddenly, the things they thought were deal breakers feel less important. The issues they used to dwell on seem fixable, manageable. They'll tell themselves, maybe if we had handled that conversation differently, or maybe I overreacted. But here's the catch. Pride is still standing in the way. They won't reach out. Not yet. They won't admit these feelings, not even to their closest friends. Instead, they'll carry this growing sense of doubt and longing in silence, trying to distract themselves, trying to convince themselves that this is just part of the process, that they'll get over it, that it'll pass. But late at night, when the distractions fade and it's just them and their thoughts, the story they told themselves about why this breakup needed to happen starts to unravel. Regret lingers quietly in the background, whispering, "What if you made a mistake?" And this is the part that really gets them. The part they'll never say out loud, not to their friends, not even fully to themselves. It's the internal battle that happens when pride and vulnerability go head to head. They're sitting there, phone in hand, staring at your name in their contacts, hovering over the message box, typing something and then deleting it. Over and over again. They think about reaching out late at night when they're lying awake, scrolling through old pictures, maybe even revisiting conversations that once felt so natural, but now feel like a closed chapter they're scared to reopen. They'll remember the last thing you said, the tone of your voice when you walked away, or even that final text exchange that didn't feel like closure at all. It's there, haunting them in the quiet moments when no one else is around. Now here's the thing, they want to know if you're thinking about them too. That curiosity eats at them. They wonder if you're staring at your phone just like they are. Wonder if you're scrolling through their social media, seeing what they're up to, trying to pick apart the meaning behind their latest post or story. They imagine scenarios where you miss them, where you're hurting, regretting, questioning, just like they are. But none of that is enough to push them over the edge to actually hit send. Why? Because reaching out would mean admitting that they miss you, that they still care, that for all the reasons they told themselves the breakup was for the best, for all the rationalizations they rehearsed in their mind, their heart is still tethered to you in ways they're not ready to confront. Pride tells them to wait. Pride tells them to stay silent. Pride tells them that if you wanted them, you'd be the one reaching out. And every day that passes where you don't, it creates this storm of doubt inside them. The longer the silence stretches, the harder it becomes for them to make the first move. They start asking themselves, what if I text and they don't reply? What if they've moved on? What if I'm just the chapter they've already closed while I'm sitting here stuck on the same page? They'll replay conversations with their friends where they confidently said, "I'm fine," or "I don't care anymore." But in those private moments, when no one's watching, it's a different story. They type something casual like, "Hey, just thinking about you. Hope you're well." Then they delete it. They consider reacting to your story. Then they don't. They open your profile, scroll through your updates, check who you're with, where you've been, but never leave a trace. This internal struggle gets heavier when they start noticing you're doing just fine without them. Maybe you're posting less, making yourself a bit more unavailable online, maybe even showing subtle signs of moving on with your life. That's when the panic kicks in. They start questioning, did I wait too long? Did I miss my chance? That pride that once protected them now becomes a cage, locking them in with their own fear and uncertainty. There's also this strange mental loop they get stuck in where they think, if I reach out now, what does that say about me? That I'm weak, that I regret everything. They don't want to give you that power. So instead, they sit with the ache, hoping you'll break the silence first so they won't have to. They want a sign, a breadcrumb, anything that gives them permission to finally reach out without feeling like they've lost control. And even when they do finally reach out, if they ever do, it won't come out as some grand confession. It'll be disguised, casual, indirect. Something vague, like, "Hey, just saw something that reminded me of you." Or, "I was in the neighborhood, thought I'd say hi." anything to avoid exposing just how deeply they've been affected by your absence. But here's the powerful truth. Your silence forces them to face parts of themselves they've been avoiding. It makes them sit in the discomfort they've been running from. And